Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so are we good to go? Amazing. Thank you very much. Alex, thank you so much for that prayer, and welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again here this afternoon. This morning, of course, we had some very thought-provoking conversations. I'm sure it got a lot of people thinking about various aspects of life, various aspects of supporting others as well. So just in case there's anyone who is new, who's joined us, I'm Vanessa Boachi, and I'm a qualified psychological therapist. So I work within the NHS, and I also run a social enterprise called Inside Out UK, which is focused on providing mental health education and support. So I'm all about mental health, I'm all about well-being, helping people to optimize their mental health and well-being. And this is a conversation that we are starting to have a bit more within the church, which I'm so glad about. As I spoke about earlier on, as I was growing up, this wasn't a conversation that we were having, and I'm sure that's something that a lot of people can agree with as well. So now we've taken that step forward to have that conversation, and now we're going to move on to talk about practical steps. So in terms of, we've looked at the what, so what is the actual difficulty? We've looked at the so what, which is how important it is. Why are we talking about this? How does this benefit us? And now we're going to move on to the now what. We've got this information, we've got the understanding that we do need to talk about mental health within the church. We do need to support our community, ourselves, our loved ones. So what can we do with this information? So that's what we're going to move on, looking at the practical steps. And just to highlight again, of course, we are talking about sensitive topics. If at any point anyone feels triggered by any of these topics that we are talking about, please do feel free to actually take a break if that's necessary. If you do need any extra support afterwards, please feel free to message me. So I will leave my email address at the end, so you can get in contact with me to ask any questions that you do have. And also, I would like to encourage everyone to use this as a safe space to ask questions, to get answers. It's best that we do have a conversation like this in an environment where we can support each other. And that ties in with being respectful as well of other people's opinions and confidentiality. So as we go through, if anyone does share anything, please remember that this is a safe space for us all. Okay, so in terms of what we're actually going to cover, these are the three main things that I want to highlight. If there's anything else that anyone wants to add, please do, of course, let me know. Use the chat function that we've got as well. So we're going to start off by looking at how you can look after your own mental health, and then moving on to how you can support other people, and then also talking about long-term support as well. So some people may be affected by what we are talking about and may not know where to go to for support. So that's more information that I will be providing as well. But before we go any further, actually, before we even answer that question itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a whiteboard on the screen. And on that whiteboard, I've just got a quick question, which is, how are you feeling? Just to do a quick check-in, want to check in to see how everyone is feeling right now. So different ways that we can facilitate this. If you are able to, and if you know how to, please feel free to actually write down on the whiteboard itself. So in order to do that, what you'd need to do is move your cursor to the top of the screen, and there's a black bar. And on that black bar, there should be a button that says annotate. And you'll be able to select the text button and write on the screen. That's one option. If you do prefer to actually use the chat function, please feel free to use that as well. Or if you prefer to actually talk, unmute yourself, please feel free to do that too. So again, it might be a bit difficult to actually write. So using the text button would be a bit easier if that's a better way for you. Okay. So give us a couple of minutes. Let me know, how are you actually feeling from what we've spoken about this morning? How does that make you feel? Okay. Also, please do feel free to unmute yourself and join in with the conversation. Okay. So we've got some people feeling tired. Some people feeling okay. Overwhelmed, which is something I think I can get out of it. Chilled, happy. Comfortable, but not 100%.
Blessed.
Blessed. I'm not sure if I can actually catch what, I think, does that say positive? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Hopeful, thoughtful. We've got a few people saying they feel thoughtful. Okay.
Appreciative.
Appreciative. Okay. So we've got lots of different emotions that people are experiencing at the moment. And however you're feeling right now, that is completely okay. Just to highlight that as well. I know sometimes when we do speak about sensitive topics, lots of different emotions come into fruition. But just to highlight that, however you're feeling at the moment, it's valid. Some people might feel that, having heard what we have spoken about, they might feel a bit guilty because they may not have maybe taken steps forward to support other people, or even just to even support themselves. But what we're looking at is moving forward. How can we proactively move forward to support ourselves and also support other people as well? So however you're feeling right now is completely valid. And sometimes it's quite important to do a check-in, just to check in with yourselves, to ask, okay, how am I actually feeling? What is actually going on with me? How am I actually responding to the current situation that I'm in at the moment? So I would encourage you to, every so often, what I usually tell people as well is to actually book an appointment with themselves. And so often we're really quick to book appointments with other people, which is great, that's fine. But when was the last time you actually booked an appointment with yourself, just to check in, to see how you're doing? So thank you very much to everyone who contributed and shared how they're feeling as well. So I'm just going to go back to the main PowerPoint. And now I want to find out a bit more about what you do to support your mental health. Are there things that you have put in place already to actually look after yourselves? So again, please feel free to annotate the board, and also feel free to use the chat box as well, the chat function, or to unmute yourself and let's have a conversation. Talk to me. How do you look after your mental health?
Take time out for yourself.
Okay. So taking time out for yourself. And how do you usually do that?
It could be like maybe switch off, maybe ignore your phone for a little bit. You could call it fasting from the phone, fasting from social media, Just doing things that you like to do, even if it's like just immersing yourself in a book, watching a movie, just making sure that that time that you spend is solely for you to relax your mind, etc.
I love that. So there's so many things that you got in there, maybe reading a book, fasting from social media. But it sounds like the whole aspect of that is just to take time out for yourself and to relax. Yeah.
Go on a holiday.
Go on a holiday. Oh gosh, I would love to go on holiday right now. Yeah. We've got some people saying, so go to the gym, self-care, exercise, going for a long walk.
Spend time with your friends. They say humor and laughter is good medicine. So for me, definitely hanging out with good friends.
Yeah, that's a great one. Spending time with other people, connecting with other people as well.
Listening to music.
Music, yeah, definitely. Music is a good one. I'm sure a lot of people do use music as a way of perhaps helping them to feel a bit calmer, improving their mood, maybe getting, positive words in the music that they're listening to. Okay. Pray, yeah, prayer as well. That's a key one.
Watching a movie.
Watching a movie. Again, so sorry?
It's a good one though.
Yeah. Again, so going back to taking that time out of your usual schedule. And what tends to happen is sometimes we're so focused on what's happening next and how we're going to reach this particular goal and how we're going to move forward with this particular thing. Or on the other hand, we're focused on things that have happened in the past, and then ruminating comes into it. Overthinking comes into perhaps things that you may have done in the past or situations that you may have been. And sometimes those thoughts can overtake your life. So actually taking that time out to be in the present moment by perhaps watching a movie or praying or doing some self-care or doing some exercise, it gives an opportunity for your mind to actually take a break and go on holiday as well. That's another way that we can look at it. Having hobbies.
Can I share a scripture?
Please go for it.
It really means a lot to me. It's when Elijah fled from Jezebel when he had just killed all the prophets. And then he fled from Jezebel. And it's 1 Kings chapter 19 from verse 4. And this is Elijah. And he himself went to a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because your journey is too great for you." So he arose, ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, to the mountain of God. And as we know, he had a vision of God, not through a still small voice. But the fact is, he was depressed. He was suicidal to the point that he prayed, "Lord, take my life. I don't want to live anymore." The angel came and touched him and gave him food and let him sleep. Food and let him sleep, And for me, that's the solution to my problem. I suffer from schizophrenia. And when I'm really depressed, not so much depressed, but anxious about something, I need to go into a routine where I just eat, sleep, rest, that routine of looking after myself, eating the right things, of course. And I see here a solution to Elijah's mental health, done by the angel. Wakes him up, arise, eat, lets him sleep, then comes back a second time, arise, eat, And in the strength of that food, you know, he was able to fast 40 days and 40 nights when he met God.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as you were reading that and explain that a bit more, it reminds me of a concept called lifestyle medicine. And with lifestyle medicine, it just takes into account that sometimes the resources that we do need and that we are looking for to improve our health and our overall well-being is within what we do in our lifestyle. So with the example that you used of food and also sleep, we know that food does provide you with that energy, and there's strong links between what we eat and also our overall well-being as well. The same way that sleep, there's a whole leap of research in regards to sleep itself, how being deprived of sleep can lead to mental health difficulties or some challenges as well. And of course, even if you think of that on a practical sense, on those days where you haven't had enough sleep, you're going to feel agitated, you're going to lose concentration, you're not going to be as productive as you do want to be. So again, it comes back into using your resources enabled to or in a holistic way to look after yourself as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'd like to say something.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, as older people, when we get to a certain age, we lost our memory fails us, and we suffer from Alzheimer's as well as dementia. What is the solution to that? To improve our memory and to avoid dementia, Alzheimer's disease?
That's a really good question. And to be honest, when we are talking about, so my area of psychological therapies and mental health is completely separate from Alzheimer's and dementia. So in terms of the actual knowledge and understanding about it, if I'm being honest, that's not my area of expertise. However, having said that, what I can do is point you in the right direction. So in terms of resources that you can look at or people that you can speak about to in regards to that. So would it be okay for me to send you some more information about that, if that's okay?
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. Great. So thank you, everyone, for sharing. It's interesting to hear a bit more about how you all look after your mental health and your well-being already. And we can see that there's a wide range of different techniques that you are already using as well. So I'm just going to go back to this biopsychosocial spiritual model that we looked at in part 1 of this workshop. Does anyone remember what this model is about?
Yeah.
Give me a thumbs up if you're familiar with the model. Okay.
I think it's all about the holistic well-being of yourself.
Each legs depend upon each other.
Yeah, definitely. So just in case there's anyone new who's joined us, just to go over this model again, this biopsychosocial spiritual model is based on the understanding that when we are talking about mental health itself, we're not looking at one approach. We're looking at all of these approaches together. So if we look at one leg of the table as one aspect of this model, so one leg being the biological model, one leg being the psychological model, social model, and spiritual model, these all support that table for it to function. And if one leg on this table was wobbly or was broken, what would happen to the table?
It won't function.
The table wouldn't be functioning as fully as it should be. Now, imagine if you were to put different things on top of the table. So you put a book on top of it, you put your laptop, you put a lamp, you put all of these things on top of the table. It's adding pressure to that table itself. And so if you had two of those legs that were broken or wobbly, and you've also got that additional pressure, that table itself is going to collapse. It's not going to be stable. So the idea is that with those, we can look at those things that you put on the table as those stressors that occur in our lives. So that can be maybe work stress, maybe family difficulties, maybe friendship difficulties, all of those things that add up on top of our table. If we are not supporting ourselves using these legs, then it's not going to help us to function at all. And it also takes into account that we're using a holistic approach as well. So not just one over the other, but using all of these aspects as well. So in part one, we had a look at how mental health difficulties can be caused by these different factors. So of course, if we've had a look at how mental health difficulties can be caused by these factors, when we are talking about supporting ourselves and helping us to improve our overall well-being and to thrive, it's also important that we take this model into account as well. So let's start off with the biological aspect. And I want to hear from you. What do you feel would be a biological approach towards improving mental health? Does anyone have any ideas?
Eating healthily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. Eating healthily. Any other ideas? Taking SSRIs. Mm-hmm. Medication.
Exercise.
Exercise, quality sleep.
Drink lots of water.
Drink lots of water. Mm-hmm.
Trust in divine. Trust in God.
Trust in God. So do you feel that would be a biological approach?
Trust in God. Spiritual.
No, that's not.
Or would that be something else?
Might be something else.
Yeah. Spiritual. Sounds like more along the lines of the spiritual approach. Someone said eating chocolate.
No.
Okay, tell me a bit more. I'm intrigued about eating chocolate.
I think it's all about the health laws as well.
Sorry?
The health laws.
The health. Yeah, your health. So overall, we've got some key things about health, getting sleep, medication, taking SSRIs, etc. Anything else that anyone wants to add? Okay, so we've got someone who said brain surgery. Okay. Anything else to add? Okay.
I was going to say having a balanced diet.
A balanced diet, yep. Hormone balancing medication. Okay.
What new start?
It's all health laws.
Health laws.
Okay. So thank you all for contributing towards that. So when we are looking at the biological aspect, there's so many things that fall under that, but some of the key aspects that a lot of people do speak about or can be quite common is medication and also probiotics. So just to break that down a bit further, someone has already mentioned about SSRIs. So SSRIs, these are a particular type of medication that when we go back to the biological approach towards mental health difficulties, we spoke about how sometimes for some people, mental health difficulties may be caused by an imbalance of chemicals in the brain. So what medication can do is also help to rebalance those hormones as well. So there might be a question, that some people might be having. Should I go ahead with taking medication if I've gone to the GP and the GP has prescribed medication for me? My answer to that is it depends. Of course, you have a choice. It's entirely up to you. And in some instances, medication can be quite helpful, just as a way of helping you to, again, as we spoke about, rebalance the emotions, so the hormones, so then you can be at a good place in order to receive therapy or to get any type of psychological support. For other people, medication may not be the approach that they would want to go by, but that is entirely up to you. As we've identified, medication can be quite helpful, but someone also mentioned exercise and going to the gym as well. So there's research that suggests that exercise can actually be more effective for mild to moderate symptoms of depression than medication itself. And just to highlight, mild to moderate levels as well. So even if you think about the role that exercise does take, it takes a huge role, again, when we go back to that connection between the mind and the body. And then there's also probiotics as well. So this is all in relation to the hormones that are based in our gut. And there's growing research. So there's not quite a lot of research in this area at the moment, but there's growing research that suggests that, as we all know, the foods that we eat have an impact on our mental health and well-being as well. So taking into account that, saying you are what you eat. If you eat healthily, then that can have an impact, a positive impact on your mental health and well-being. We've got a question.
Yes. What about taking HRT?
HRT?
HRT, yeah.
What do you mean by HRT? I'm not sure if I've come across that before.
Hormone replacement for imbalance. Imbalance.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Again, that's not my area of expertise. Okay. My area is more in the psychological aspect of that. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact answer on that, but I'm happy to provide you any extra support on that through anyone else or signposting you, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's a bit about the biological aspect. Now, moving on to the psychological aspect, which this part is my area. How do you feel you can support yourself from a psychological point of view? What type of support is there?
To visit a psychiatrist and get some help.
Partaking in therapy.
Yeah, so therapy, seeing a mental health professional, whether that's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, talking therapies, CBT.
A counsellor. Seeing a counsellor as well.
A counsellor. So basically seeing professionals, CBT. Okay. So as we've spoken about, getting psychological support from trained professionals. So whether that is a psychologist or a therapist or a counsellor, getting that support from someone who is actually trained in that field as well. Another aspect is self-help. So there's a lot of self-help materials out there as well that can help you to actually take practical steps towards improving your health and your well-being as well. One concept that I like to use when supporting people as well is something called the well-being bank account. So with the Wellbeing Bank Account, this is an approach that I use with my clients and people that I work with, just to get that understanding of well-being itself. So just to explain that a bit more, everyone has a bank account, right? And in that bank account, you're able to withdraw money, you can top up and put money into your account, you can transfer onto others. There's so many different things that you can do with your bank account. But at the end of the day, whatever you do with that bank account, you will either be in surplus, so you have loads of money, you might be rich, or you might be at zero. And the other option is for you to be in your overdraft, so at minus. So you've got those three different aspects, either at surplus, at zero, or in your overdraft. So the idea is that this is something similar that can happen with your well-being as well, in the sense where there's things that you can do to actually top up your well-being. And as we can see on the diagram on the board, those we will refer to as investments. So back to some of those things that we've mentioned before, such as exercise, relaxation, sleep, meditation, prayer, rest. These are things that can make you feel energized. Of course, this is going to be different for everyone, but finding out what that thing is that helps you to feel energized is also a great way of topping up that well-being bank account as well. And then when we look at things like withdrawals, so this can be things such as comparing yourself to other people. It can also be things such as maybe spending too much time on social media, or maybe not engaging in activities that you normally would do. And the more you do those activities, the more you do those things, that takes away from your well-being bank account as well. So, as I mentioned, the whole idea behind this is to make sure that you are at a place where you are full, so that you can actually support yourself, be productive, and also being able to support people around you, the people that you care about as well. So just to give you an example, if I had £100 or £100 in my wellbeing bank account, and my younger brother asked me for £150, would I be able to give them the £150?
No.
Give what you don't have.
Sorry?
You can't give what you don't have.
I can give what I have, yeah. But what would that do to me?
Well, if you give what you don't have, then you will be in a debit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that could either put me in my overdraft, which means that I'm giving to others with and taken away from myself, or on the other hand, I won't be able to help others as much as I would like to. Does that make sense? So it's important that we look at ways of topping up our wellbeing bank account, and that comes into the self-care aspect and supporting ourselves by implementing self-help techniques as well. Okay.
There's another way. Right, there's another way. If somebody asks for 150, as you mentioned, okay, you could be honest with your brother and say to your brother, listen, I cannot give you 150, but I could give you £75. So it's half and half, so you could still survive without feeling the pinch, and he could still have, he could have some more money, or get some money, right? Unless, and then you might say to him, look, there might be a way if I ask somebody else who could top it up to 75, but you must not bring yourself right into a position where you do without. You can help your brother and sister, right? But sometimes you cannot give them all of it. You can only give them a certain amount. And sometimes the person will be happy if you give her something, then nothing at all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I love the way that you illustrated that with being able to actually support others without taking away from yourself. And even that little that you are able to give to others, it might be little for you, but it might be a big thing for them as well. So yeah, that's definitely another way of seeing that. And even if we was to put that in the context of our mental health, how could we do that? What would that actually look like on a practical level in the context of mental health?
Well, you're helping the person.
Mm-hmm.
The person, by doing that, as I said before, even though the person didn't get all what he asked for,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives him an understanding that you, as a giver, understand him, so he could there's somebody else that understands him, rather than him keeping the pressure onto himself. Right. So what do I say? Something shared is pressure less.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of the pressure, but it's some of the pressure is left his mind, because he's opened up to the person. The person's helped him, so they're willing to help.
Mm-hmm.
So the person will see that, and the person's helping, and he understands that he could come to you as an individual and
Mm-hmm.
talk it through, and you could help him with constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, you're able to, again, offer that support to him. So, he knows that if anything, I'm there. So I'm being aware of what is going on. But at the same time, it comes back to not taking away from yourself as well, which is quite beneficial for when we are looking for ways of looking after our mental health and well-being. And even in the chat, someone has mentioned boundaries. That's a key one. Boundaries, about knowing your limits, and that you are not always the answer to others' problems. Share the load. A problem shared is a problem halved. And in that sense, knowing what you can do, that comes down to being self-aware. Being self-aware allows you to actually put those boundaries in place and say, okay, I can actually help you, and I do want to help you. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't want to help you, I actually do, but there's only so much that I can do for this situation that we're in right now. And we're going to talk about that in a bit more depth as well. But of course, at this point, we're looking at supporting ourselves. There was a question or contribution as well from someone.
Yes, I would like to say something.
Mm-hmm.
That shows love in action when you help others. By helping others, you're helping yourself as well. And Jesus said it is more blessed to give than to receive. And when you think about that widow who gave all that she had, and Jesus looked at the heart and the motive in which she gave it. Yeah, and she said she have given more than the others. The others give for sure. They give more, but with a sure not in loving heart. They want to see how much you could give then, But this poor old widow, she gave all that she have, and God said she have given more, and she more than the others, because she give it love and with a good motive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So it just goes to show that it's more about the quality of the support as opposed to the quantity. If it's a little about that you are able to give, and that is what you can give, and it's all you can do, that's okay. That's fine. It's more about the quality as opposed to the quantity. I think we've got another contribution from Angela.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say a point on that aspect. Sometimes with the roles that we have, either within our families, within our church setting, or within our work, those boundaries are so important, because we may come into a position where we feel we either have to live up to expectations, particularly if we've got a very senior role and people are expecting us to do something, even though we may feel overwhelmed or overloaded. we may still want to please. So pleasing comes into that as well, so that we don't come across as not being very good in our role, or being up to it, or not being able to deal with the situation. So it's this sense of failure. We don't want to come across as if we can't do something. So we live up to those expectations and the pleasing, because we don't want to be seen badly in someone else's view, like the withdrawal basket, worrying about what others may think. And I think that element of what others may think about us is really big in terms of our mental health well-being.
Definitely. Thank you so much for highlighting that as well. And as you mentioned, being in a leadership position, that gives you a sense of responsibility. And sometimes it can be quite difficult to put those boundaries in place. And it reminds me of, I'm sure many of you have come across this analogy before, of when you get on a plane, the air hostess, they always give a set of instructions. And they say that in the event of an emergency, make sure you put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can actually help anyone else. And now, if we actually look at what that concept of the oxygen mask is in the aspect of mental health and well-being, that oxygen mask is that self-care, is that self-love, making sure that we have put ourselves in a position where we are looking after ourselves before we can actually do anything to support anyone else. And that is not selfish in any way, shape or form. Putting boundaries in place is actually selfless, because you are putting yourself in a position where you can actually give to people at your best. What good are you to someone else if you are at minus? What is that going to say about the quality of support that you can offer them if you are in your overdraft? So it's all about, I guess it comes back to perspective, even though as much as we do want to help everyone, which is great, I'm sure in the positions that you are in, being in the church as well, the core of what you want to do is support others, but also considering that you want to provide them with quality support. And in order to provide them with quality support, you also need to be at your best as well. Okay. Was there anything else anyone wanted to add at all before we move on to the next aspect? Okay. So something else that I also like to highlight is emotions, and giving ourselves the opportunity to actually listen to our emotions. And this is something that has been put together to provide us a guide towards what we can do when we are feeling a particular way. And I like to see emotions as ways that our mind and body actually communicates with each other. So imagine if there was a child who was actually trying to get your attention because they want something, and each time they ask for something, you shut them down. What is that child going to do?
Go elsewhere or have a tantrum.
Go elsewhere or have a tantrum, yep. Exactly. So they're either going to go somewhere else, but they're going to keep on going until they get what they want. And sometimes we can look at emotions in the same way or in a similar way, where if we suppress those emotions, then it's only going to come back bigger. So using emotions like signals and something that can actually give us direction towards how we should navigate in life as well. So just to go through a few examples, if you're feeling sad, that might be a sign or a signal that there's something missing. That's something that might be missing. It could be based on your own preferences. For some people, it might just be that they need sleep, like what we've spoken about before. It might just mean that they need a nutritious meal. It might just be that they need to connect with other people. But most of the time when we're feeling sad, it's because there's something that is missing. Another example is, let's go through loneliness. That might be a sign that you need to connect with people. I think that one's quite self-explanatory. If you are feeling, that sense of loneliness, and in the society that we are in today, a lot of people do experience loneliness, and it's quite common, especially, it might be hard to think, but it's quite common within the church as well, where people are around, other people as well, but then when it's time to, go home, or when they're by themselves or behind closed doors, they're not connecting with people. There's a difference between being around people and being able to connect with people as well. Just to go through another example, let's go through the last one, stress. Stress might be a sign that you need to slow down and you need to take things one step at a time. Most of the time when we're feeling stressed, it's because we're overwhelmed with the demands of life, needing to do this, needed to do that, needed to do this. But sometimes there's a concept called false urgencies, and that just refers to those things that we feel we need to do there and then, but they're actually not that important. And it comes back to looking at your priorities. What is important to you? And being able to understand those priorities will help to actually put those boundaries in place. So then when the false urgency comes into play, you're able to actually say, no, this is not something that I need to do now. Sometimes we place a lot of expectations and pressures on ourselves as well. But again, it goes back to putting those boundaries in place. But I would encourage everyone to actually, take that time to listen to your emotions. Back to something that I mentioned earlier on about booking that appointment with yourself, to actually ask yourself, how am I feeling? What is actually going on? Listening to yourself, because if you don't listen to yourself and your emotions, then it's going to be like that child who is banging on, asking for your attention, and you're just saying, no, I'm not going to give you my attention. As a result, what will happen then? And that's why we see, especially in mental health services, there's a research statistic that suggests that Black people are 17 times more likely to be diagnosed with a severe mental health difficulty than their white counterparts. I'm not sure what that was. But yeah, so 17 times more likely to be diagnosed with a severe mental health difficulty. And when we think about that more, unpack it a bit more, it comes down to lots of different factors. But one of those things that come to mind straight away is that suppression of emotions. We don't deal with the emotions there and then. We say, oh, we'll do it later, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. Before you know it, a week has gone. Before you know it, a month has gone. Before you know it, a year has gone. Before you know it, that's it. So taking that time out to listen to your emotions. I think someone raised their hand.
You said that there are three things that controls us. You have your emotion, your conscience, and your willpower. Those three things control us. So the greatest one should be the willpower. Right? So at times we can't make our emotion control us. We got to control our emotions.
It's a difficult one. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Some people might be able to control their emotions. Some people might find it a bit more challenging. And that's where it comes back to the difference between... Sorry?
Where it comes back to the willpower.
To the willpower, and also just to add to that as well, difference between getting support from professionals who'll be able to facilitate that healing process as well.
Also, all right, there's a lot of things that we as Black people, our older generation, didn't taught us how to be emotional, how to control emotional, or things like that. Because when I was growing, when most of us were growing up, we didn't see our parents, right, how how they solve problems. A lot of times, if husband and wife disagree with something, if your mother and father disagree with something, they won't say it in front of the kids. They go behind closed doors and they discuss it amongst themselves. Now, we are young people, we're children, and eventually we will grow up to be adults. And a lot of times we do not have the tool to address a lot of these simple problems, right? And even now, my generation are having difficulties of expressing yourself or communicating to yourself, communicating to others about problems. We tend to keep it to ourselves. And as you said, we keep it. Then all of a sudden we start talking to ourselves and we start doing things. All of a sudden we're in a mental home because we cannot cope with pressure. So a lot of it is to do how we were brought up, how our parents, because don't forget, we learn from our parents. We get all our information from our parents, about life, how to deal with life. And if we get some of the information, right, because sometimes it's a taboo subject, with health, right? You always know a member of a family that's mentally ill, right? But it's all hushed. People don't know, understand why this person is that way, but they don't want to say it. They don't want to say it. So it's what we've been taught or not taught, right? So if we're not taught on mental issues and how to deal with it, or express ourselves, how do you expect us to express ourselves later on in life? And sometimes, education helps us sometimes, because when you're educated, right, not A standards or B standards, but when I'm saying basic education, you realize that certain things that you were brought up or with the knowledge of is wrong. So, what you do, you try to correct it, right? But it doesn't help. If you knew what you know now, if you knew it then, you won't be in this position.
Yeah.
That's all I could say.
No, I really appreciate that contribution. I think, was someone going to say something?
Can I just interject for a little bit, Vanessa?
Please do. Go ahead.
Because since there's a few people that want to say something, can I ask that you raise your hand so Vanessa can see it? Because I know Gus has been there for a while.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Gus.
So please raise your hand, let Vanessa see you, and then she will reach out to you to say something. Is that okay? Because I know a few people have messaged me and said they wanted to say something, but they couldn't get in.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Gus, please go ahead. Sorry for the wait.
No, it's okay. It's totally fine. I'm actually usually one of the perpetrators who usually just speaks without raising their hand. But I'm just not in the mood today. But I really like what you're showing on your screen. I really like it in terms of, analyzing your emotions and asking yourself why you're feeling how you're feeling. Something which I can't help, because I think it's just what I do as well, is I always tend to look at a lot of things, even from the biblical sense as a theologian. And it's also one thing which came to my head is I agree with what you've written here, and something which in my life I've also experienced is that sometimes I've realized for me, when I've felt some certain emotions or long periods of feeling empty, but yet I'm still doing, quote unquote, well, in terms of your job is going well, you're driving how you want, but you're still feeling that emptiness. That's one thing from what I've just studied, is that sometimes I realized God made us to be in a certain way and made us in his image. But sometimes in the world that we're living in, we look at society, and society is also trying to give you definitions of what greatness is, or what being complete is, or what satisfaction looks like. but God has already given us that definition. And it's image and working on that. And sometimes I realize in society, we take the definition of the world in the sense of, I have to accomplish this job and my identity is rooted in that job. Therefore, until I get it, I'm feeling empty. Mm-hmm. Even if I do get it, I feel full, but who's to say you're going to keep it forever? You might lose, feel like now I'm in depression again. So it's one of the things where I think it's important for us, especially as believers and people who understand who God is, that our identity is not rooted in things or status. That's what I liked even what Charlotte was saying. It's about your mindset. If you have your mindset is fixed on, I know who I am, and it's separate from the things I'm doing, because God made me complete already, then you can at least have the mindset of, okay, it's harder for me to get anxious about the future or depressed, because I know in terms of the task God has given me, He's equipping me and I'm doing God's work and it's moving forward. And in terms of life, you have the mindset of, this job doesn't make me. It's really nice. I enjoy it. But if I do lose it, I'm still fine. So I can imagine that a lot of people probably went through difficulties during the lockdown, because if you feel as if this is my job, now you've lost in the space of 2 weeks. Your company exists. You're asking yourself, who am I? Because you've rooted your identity in your job. So I just think that's an important thing for us to consider as well, in terms of what is your perspective? What's your base thought of value? Where's the value of your life coming from? Is it from what you do, or who God has already created you to be?
Definitely. That's such an important message that you have spoken about, and the way that you actually articulated that and even gave those examples, it made me feel quite heavy, because it's something that a lot of people do experience, attaching their self-worth and their identity to external things. And of course, once you do that, as you mentioned, that taints your understanding of who you are. And so if the job doesn't go well, automatically you're gonna think that there's something wrong with you and you're not going well, or you are doing something wrong. But separating yourself from those external things, and actually goes back to what's meaningful to you and what's valuable to you and who you are as a believer and who you are in Christ as well, centering yourself around that, that can be a helpful way for many people to actually build upon that self-awareness that they have as well. So it's really key, especially during this period of time. A lot of people are going through it. A lot of people have had, you mentioned the keyword loss. And even if we look at the impacts of loss, there's a concept called the 7 stages of grief. And with that concept, it doesn't just apply to when someone passes away. It also applies to, when you lose something that is quite dear to you. So whether that's a job, whether that is your routine. A lot of people lost their routine during this whole lockdown period. Some people might have used their routine, going to work, socializing with people at work, doing their job and coming home, using that routine as a way of looking after their mental health or looking after their well-being, but then having to lose that because of what's going on right now, which we don't have any control over. That of course does have an impact on how you feel as a person, or how you even interact, how your productivity levels and things like that. So that's a really, really key point that you mentioned. I'm just going to check if anyone else has raised their hand as well for any questions or any contributions. Okay, so it doesn't look like anyone's raised their hand.
I think Angela has, yeah.
Oh, Angela, sorry, I missed that.
Thank you. I just looking at the current screen that you have, the one emotion that really stood out for me was that word shame. And just in terms of my career of working within social work and counselling, one of the things that I really did come across many, many times was working with individuals who, for years and years and years, even into their adult lives, from teenagers, children, they had been carrying this sense of shame. And it's only when they get to a certain stage of their lives where it becomes overwhelming that they were able to talk about it. I mean, I remember speaking with adults who'd been carrying shame for over 30 years. And managing it somehow, and then feeling that they'd got to a point where they needed to address it. It's such a powerful feeling, and it's something that's really significant because it's an internal feeling, but where it comes from is external. So it's either someone being shamed externally by someone else or a group, or being shamed because of something that somebody or others are aware of. And it's something that is so difficult to address unless the individual is able and ready to do that. But it really does create such an overwhelming, almost a cloud over someone's life.
Definitely. Shame is a very powerful emotion. And when it's not dealt with, or when it's not facilitated or spoken through, of course, that is going to eat away at the person's well-being, at the individual's well-being as well. So even just off the back of that, if there is anyone who is experiencing that, I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to actually get that support. And being able to actually process some of these emotions as well is so fundamental. I'm sure, Angela, you're a counsellor, I believe. So, you definitely understanding the importance of processing these emotions, especially, as James mentioned before, sometimes we haven't been in an environment where people are actually teaching us how to process those emotions. And that's why conversations like this are important. Most people parent how they were parented. So if you were parented in a particular way, then you're most likely to pass that on to your own children, and then so on and so on. And that leads into a concept called intergenerational trauma, and intergenerational difficulties that happen from generation to generation to generation, not because there's some sort of curse, not because there's some sort of bondage, but just because those emotions and those difficulties haven't been dealt with. So it's just someone who is in pain parenting someone who is in pain, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's important for us to be having these conversations. So again, it comes back to that mental health education, mental health support. And it's amazing that we are in a space where we are able to actually have this conversation and get answers for the questions as well. I'm just going to read out a few comments that we have in the chat. Apologies for missing that. So someone said it's about mindset. So emotions are not wrong or evil. Whilst we should make sure emotions don't control us, that doesn't mean we mustn't talk about them or deal with them. Controlling them doesn't mean they are dealt with. The suppression or control of certain emotions is what can lead to lots of change. Thank you for sharing that. And as an addition to that, I think there has been a collective grief from the loss of the world as we knew it. Yeah, definitely collective. How does someone who has no guilt or feelings deal with issues? Pastor Blake has a comment.
Just to support what Angela was saying, one of the things we will face a lot as Christians, supporting people through bereavement and grief with death, that sometimes adds on to mental health issues. A lot of grief sometimes and bereavement, prolonged grief and bereavement, a lot of it is shame and guilt. What I should have done that I didn't do, how I might have spoken to the person prior to their death, how I might have treated them, the things I neglected. So a lot of sometimes shame is masked with grief and bereavement. And so, these things have to, so you, the practitioner, have to sometimes with the person have to work through these things to work out to see exactly where the person is. Because sometimes when you think it's genuine grief or bereavement, a lot of it sometimes is shame.
No, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that as well, and even highlighting it. Even just goes to show how layered things are. It goes back to something we spoke about earlier on, which is about the full spectrum of human existence. It's not just taking one aspect into account, we're taking multiple aspects into account as well. So the example that you gave, Pastor Blake, is a great example, because there's people who are experiencing grief or who are going through a difficult time, but there's particular emotions such as shame which is attached to that. There's other emotions on the board as well that could also contribute to that as well, but of course we know that shame is a very powerful emotion that can eat at your well-being as well. Someone has also said that shame often manifests itself as other behaviors. It can come out as lack of self-esteem, of confidence, or perhaps in other ways. And that even reminds me of the case study that we looked at earlier on with I think it was Lorraine, I believe. She was feeling that shame after her incident, after she experienced abuse. And that, as a result, had an impact on her self-esteem. So it just goes to show, when we look at back to that cognitive cycle that we looked at, with how thoughts can have an impact on our emotions, the things that we do, and the way that our bodies respond to things as well. So anyway, with looking at emotions, processing them, if it's something that you are finding difficult to process yourself, then it goes back to finding that support and getting that professional support, so someone who can actually take you through those emotions. And it's not to say that you're choosing this over the word of God. No, you can do both at the same time. There's many practitioners out there who are actually trained with the psychological evidence and things like that, and are also believers as well. So they understand, the perspectives that you'll be coming from. So using these particular mental health professionals is a great way to actually facilitate your healing process as well.
Can I say something?
Please do.
Yeah. In lockdown, we've all been isolated in our homes, and loneliness can be a big factor this time. How can somebody connect? Because they may be around people, but they may not be connected with them. So how do you resolve that?
That's a really, really good question, with being able to connect. And of course, connecting with people is going to be different for everyone. It comes back to the way that you communicate with other people as well. So for some people, I'm sure many of you have come across that concept of love languages, and that the concept of love languages is not just applicable to relationships on a marital sense or on the husband and wife sense. It's also applicable to friendships and forming meaningful relationships. So when it comes to connecting with people, it's always important to actually find out what your communication style is. And then once you have an understanding of what your communication style is, the people who you are trying to connect to as well, getting an understanding of their communication style. And it's about having that conversation, an open conversation about the way that you like to connect, and perhaps the way that the person that you are trying to support is also likes to connect with other people as well. So of course, again, it's going to be quite different for everyone. But if we look at this on a more practical level, after you have had a look at your communication style, it may be for someone that their communication style is perhaps, let's say, words of affirmation. So in that case, that might be that when they are having conversations with their friends, they will speak about things that help them to feel better. It might be looking at scriptures in the word that encourage them to feel better as a way of connecting with other people. For someone, it might be acts of service. So in that case, their way of connecting might be perhaps maybe sending some flowers to someone to cheer them up, or sending them a box of chocolates, or things like that. So to answer your question, it will be quite different for everyone, but it just comes back to understanding a bit more about your communication style, and then also referring that information onto or other people, so the people who are trying to support you, or people who you are trying to support as well. Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think we've got two people who've raised their hand.
And Sister Baptiste was first, and then Kazia, and then Gus.
Okay. So we'll go in that order.
Yeah.
I was thinking about forgiveness as well, because some people they have guilt and they don't really forgive themselves, or even to forgive others as well. They don't forgive themselves as well. So that can cause mental problems as well, I think.
Yeah, forgiveness as well. There's a lot of people who haven't forgiven themselves for things that they've done maybe several years ago, and again it ties in with that shame and that guilt eating away at your well-being as well. So thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so sorry, who was next?
Hi. I just wanted to ask, I know someone who's older who's been a victim of a emotionally, mentally abusive relationship for years, and they're Christian as well, but they want SDA, and they want to speak to a counsellor who's also SDA, who can actually help them from a spiritual side as well. So I want to know who to go to for that.
So are you asking for counselling services for that are run by Seventh-day Adventists?
Yeah, specifically. Because they don't trust going to a counsellor from outside.
Yeah, okay, thank you. To my understanding, there's Cornerstone Counselling. Yes. I believe, yeah, Cornerstone Counselling. So that's run by our church. There's a network called the Black and Asian Therapy Network, and on their website it's a directory, and on the directory you can literally type in like what type of therapist that you are looking for, and that will help you to or that will bring up a selection of different people that you could possibly contact. So those are the two options that I know of, specifically Seventh-day Adventist mental health professionals, and of course myself as well. Yeah, okay, you're welcome. Sorry, who was next in the queue?
I think it was me.
Okay.
Yeah, Gus.
I was just going to quickly try and respond from the little that I know in terms of connecting with people from the question that was there. Sometimes, coming again from the biblical perspective, this is not the complete answer, but it's a portion. So in Amos 3:3, you'll say, "Can two walk together lest they be agreed?" So that Bible text will let you know that when you're in agreement with people, it's easier to walk together, it's easier to connect, it's easier to gel, it's easier to move in a certain direction, because your common interests are making you come together. So sometimes I think when I found myself talking to some people you simply will not connect with, purely because you have different interests. And I think that's okay. So sometimes you have to analyze, why am I not connecting? If it's you're disinterested in the conversation and what is generally going on quite often, then sometimes you might have to find another group where you do kind of, you're more together, you more have the same mind, same culture, you kind of think alike, and you can understand each other better. That's something to consider. And sometimes I found myself that I kind of don't really connect with people, but when I put my effort in there to understand them and the environment they're from, I started to see their humor. I started to understand it. And before you know it, you kind of just blend in. Kind of like how a lot of us come from different countries, maybe for people from Africa or Caribbean or other countries. You come here, at first you don't have a clue as to what British humor is, or the lingo or the slang. But by being here in perseverance, you do kind of learn some stuff and you kind of start to understand their humor. So I think there's those two aspects to consider when you're struggling to connect with a group of people.
Thank you very much for sharing. And I guess that ties into what we'll look at in the next part, which is about how to support other people as well, or ways of supporting other people. Was there anyone else who wanted to contribute at all? Or have we got everyone? James.
Sorry. In terms of the self-help you mentioned about these things, are there books you can recommend? I notice a couple of books you've alluded to, like The Love Languages, maybe 7 Habits of Highly Effective People with the bank account issue. That comes from Stephen Covey. There's Brené Brown in terms of shame and daring greatly. I don't know if there's any others you can recommend in terms of reading for yourself, becoming the emotional sides.
Yeah, so there's a book that I would recommend. It's called It Didn't Start With You. Let me just get the author up. I think it's by a man called Mark, and his surname begins with a W. I'm just going to get that up. So I'll write it on the board, actually.
Write it on the board.
Yeah, so it's called It Didn't Start With You. Let me just spell his name correctly. Okay. So that's one book that I would recommend. Another one that I would recommend, one second, it's called The Body Keeps Score. I'm going to write that on the board as well. The Body Keeps Score. And it's by, let me write the person's name, Bessel van der. Okay.
Are they sort of like psychiatrists, psychologists, social science?
So with It Didn't Start With You, this is it's a really easy to read book. So it's not heavily, there aren't a lot of psychological jargon in it as well. It's about transgenerational trauma. It's a really good book to explain a bit more about how some of the difficulties that we're experiencing may not have started with us and maybe beyond, our own understanding as well. So that's a really good book. And The Body Keeps Score is about that connection between the mind and the body when we do go through difficulties, traumatic difficulties as well. So it's a really good book to look that I would recommend. Did I spell the name correctly? Correction, Mark. Oh yes, there's an L. Yeah, there is an L. Apologies. So just in case you can't see the chat, the surname for It Didn't Start With You, the book by Mark Wycombe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but it's WOLYNN. So there's an L there.
WLYMN.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daniela. Thank you. Okay. Was there any other contributions at all before we move on? We've got James. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, look, when it comes to advice from the, put it this way, should one get advice from SDA if you're living in an abusive relationship, or should you get advice from the outside SDA?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I would say get advice from wherever you feel comfortable. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all policy. I'm not sure of the context behind that as well. But yeah, I would generally say that it just depends on where you feel comfortable, where you're able to express yourself, where you're able to actually open up. For some people, it might be within the church. For some people, it might be outside of the church. So it really depends. Yeah. Okay. So thank you again. Thank you very much for all your contributions towards this section. So of course, this section was looking a bit more about the psychological things, such as the self-help materials that we can use. Something that I also would recommend as well is, I don't think I've got it up. Oh, yes, I do have it up here. It's a wellness plan, creating a wellness plan. If anyone is interested in a template for that as well, I can send that to you. So if you could just drop your email address in the chat box, and then I'll just email across that wellness plan for you. So it's something that I put together myself just as a way of helping people to identify their triggers and also to actually create an action plan, something that you can refer to as well during those difficult times. Okay. And then, of course, we've touched upon the social aspect already, which is more about connecting with other people. And of course, we are quite familiar with the spiritual aspect as well. And these were two texts which really stood out to me, which I actually personally go to for comfort as well from a spiritual aspect. So I'm just going to read them out. So the first one is from Isaiah 41, verse 10. It says, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand." And the second one, which is from 2 Corinthians 1, verse 3, "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." And I love that because it reminds me again of making sure that you are in a good place, so then you can also support other people. And for many of us, our source of strength comes from, the word of God and connecting and having a relationship with God as well. So overall, anyway, we've had a look at supporting ourselves using the biopsychosocial spiritual model, understanding that there's things that we could do on a biological level, psychological level, social level, and also spiritual level to support ourselves. Did anyone have any questions or any comments on that at all? No? Okay. So then in terms of supporting others, which I'm just going to go through quickly. So first and foremost, being quite gentle with people. So I love this illustration which speaks about, how much you know about what someone is going through and what someone actually is going through. And sometimes we only see people or connect with people from church perhaps once a week. So we only know a fraction, if that, of what they are experiencing. And something we spoke about earlier on is, sometimes we'll come to church and do happy Sabbath, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, and keep it moving. Whereas we don't actually know what is going on in that individual's life as well. And even to look at this from a different perspective as well, sometimes what we see on the outside might be negative emotions or anger or stress or things like that. And we don't know those things that are leading towards that. So being gentle with people is first and foremost a great approach to go by. And so there's 3 aspects of this that I want to just touch upon. Sometimes you might not even know what to do. You might be in a situation where you do want to support someone, but you don't know what to do. And in that case, it comes to sowing those seeds. So being able to actually generate those open conversations, and also utilizing the programs that you do have at church. So there's this quote here: you take care of the sowing, God will take care of the growing. And with that, it just goes back to, it's okay to not know all the answers. It's okay to not be in a position where you can support a particular person. Of course, we have our own resources, and we have limited resources, and sometimes we place a lot of stress on ourselves to be able to do things a particular way. But again, going back to the concept of supporting others without taking away from ourselves. And if you can just sow those seeds, that's a great way as well. The second aspect is about speaking their language. So this is something that I think it was Gus who touched upon as well. So, being able to actually connect with that individual. We spoke about using a person-centered approach, not my approach, not your approach, but a person-centered approach to be able to support other people, speaking their language, understanding that just because this thing helped me get through my mental health challenge doesn't mean that it's going to help every person about their mental health challenge as well. And something that is quite common that a lot of people do is when someone comes to them to talk about their problem, they start talking about their problem, and that's not giving the person who is trying to get that support an opportunity to actually express themselves. They're not getting that opportunity to be able to speak about what their difficulty is, but just allowing them to talk and listening. That's key, listening to what the individual is saying without thinking of, oh, what should I say next? How am I going to solve their problem? Sometimes people just want to be listened to. And so this quote really illustrates that well. The best way to communicate with someone is by speaking their language. It just goes back to, if you're trying to communicate to someone who speaks French and they don't know how to speak English, you're not going to try and help them by speaking English. You're either going to learn the language, or you're going to find someone who speaks their language to support them as well. And of course, as we've mentioned, it's okay not to know all the answers. There are people who are trained to be able to support people through their healing process as well. And at times, as people who do want to actually support other people, people who actually do want to be there for other people, we want to do our best to support others. But if you don't know the answer, that is okay. You're not going to know all the answers. Pass the mic. If you can't sing, pass the mic to someone who actually can sing, and so that they are able to actually do that job properly. So those are the main things that I would recommend when trying to support other people. As I mentioned, of course, you might not know all of the answers, and that is completely okay as well. Did anyone have any questions about that at all? We've got Leroy.
I can give you a text that illustrates exactly the three things that you just said.
Mm-hmm.
It's Matthew 11, verse
20.
It says, "Come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden,
I will give
you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light."
Amen.
Now, in that society, they had a double yoke, where you would yoke up with 2 oxen or something. And Jesus is saying, come alongside me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that's what we need to be like Jesus. Come alongside somebody and help them lift the burden. But do not jump up and prance up and, because that makes the yoke heavy. That's to be gentle and lowly in heart. And as you said, treat people the way you would like to be treated.
Definitely. Thank you very much for sharing that. That really summarized what we've spoken about. Thank you. I think there was someone else who wanted to make a contribution.
Well, we don't know everything. We don't know everything, so we are all learners. We learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are here in this world to be Christ's representative, and we are here to help others.
Mm-hmm.
We can't give what we don't have, you know. If we have Jesus with us, we could share it with others and tell them about Jesus. He has the answer to all the problems of life. We don't have all the answers, and we can only do what is possible, but God could do the impossible.
Yeah. No, definitely. Thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you. Anyone else? Any last minute contributions at all?
Is it okay for me to add something?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Just now, I was just going to add that I do think sometimes, you know, people aren't necessarily looking for answers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just looking for someone to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that anyone can do. I think sometimes it's just human tendency wants to answer and give a solution to people that come to us. So I think oftentimes people just want you to listen and empathize. So I think that's something we can all, you know, speaking of myself, we can all do better at. And we'll always, you know, it may not change this person's scenario, but if they at least feel like someone has heard them, that can make a big difference, I think.
Definitely. It comes back to, you know, actually using that person-centered approach and listening to that individual rather than whilst they're talking, you're thinking of how am I going to respond to this? Just listening to them. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I give you another passage?
Go for it.
Useful. It's Galatians chapter 6. It says, "Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burden, and so fulfill the law of Christ."
Thank you very much. Yeah, that also summarizes that quite well. Thank you. Was there one more person?
Yeah, Vanessa, I just wanted to point out, though, that the intention may be positive and good. However, there are situations beyond which someone who's not trained just can't go. So with what I do mentoring of young people kind of in my spare time. And there have been situations, Vanessa, where I have been absolutely clueless as to what advice to give because they're young people. They normally assume an older person has the answers once they've told me what is on their heart. And I do remember one incident where one young person who had issues with very serious issues, criminal issues, and it was very difficult for me to know how to handle it. So this has been quite a good session, and what's really important is the signpost that you've got there, just to know if we do find ourselves unable to manage what we're hearing, there are places we can go to then signpost that young person or that person too. I think that's really important to kind of stress.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, looking after yourself as well, because some of the things that you do hear might even be quite traumatic for you, listening to all of those issues as well. So how are you supporting yourself during that time as well? And these are important things that, again, we do need to think about. There's some load and some burdens that we can actually, pass on to someone who, again, is qualified to be able to deal with that and be able to actually manage that. Because sometimes it may be that you have the person's best interest at heart, but you might even be doing more damage than you actually think with, the way that you are talking to them, or maybe the way that you are trying to support them. So again, coming back to signposting. So I'm just going to put up the whiteboard again. I'm just going to write down some services that I would recommend. So first and foremost, GP. GPs are, the first point of contact. Next thing I would recommend is within the UK, there's a service called IAPT, which is, I'm going to write that down. So it's improving access to psychological therapies. And they should have one in most areas as well. There's also, as we've spoken about, the Cornerstone Counselling. Services. There's also the Black and Asian Therapy Network. There's an organisation called Black Thrive. They provide therapy as well. There's also one called, off the top of my head, Our Naked Truths. They also provide free therapy. So these are services that you can go to. Of course, whoever you do go to is entirely up to you, whether that is someone within the church, whether that's outside of the church, that is entirely up to you as well. Just to plug in my organisation as well, so that's Inside Out Wellbeing. So again, we provide mental health education. So we do workshops like this, workshops based on providing people with the tools and techniques to be able to manage and also optimize their well-being. So it's about giving people those tools to be able to help themselves and also to help other people. So I hope everyone has found this helpful. Of course, again, we have spoken about quite a heavy subject. It might have got a lot of you thinking about so many different things, how you can support yourselves and also how to support others. If there was anything that, again, you did find quite triggering from this conversation that we have had, please do make sure you reach out to someone for support, even if that is me or one of your leaders at church or your GP. Just getting that support is so fundamental, because it is difficult, it's hard, and dealing with multiple different issues at the same time does have an impact on your mental health and your well-being. So please do get the support that you do need.
Quick question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Which of those are Seventh-day Adventist run? I know the Cornerstone is, and is that the only one, or is it another one run by the Seventh-day Adventists?
That's the only one that I know of, the Cornerstone Counselling Services.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but if you do go onto the Black and Asian Therapy Network, their website, as I mentioned, you can type in what type of therapists you do want. So there may potentially be some Seventh-day. I know there's some Christian therapists on there. I'm not sure if they're Seventh-day Adventists, but you could give that a go as well. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? In terms of signposting or passing the mic, if somebody's approached you and you feel you're in at the deep end and you do need to pass the mic, you tell them first? Do you refer them? Do you ask them to refer themselves? Does it depend on the circumstance?
Definitely depends on the circumstance.
How do you do that without sort of breaking their confidence if they need to be referred to a professional body?
That's a really good question. So, of course, again, it does depend on the individual. And I think, again, going back to what we've spoken about of putting that person first, so their needs at the center of whatever decision that you do make. So sometimes it's as simple as even asking them the question, do you want me to, do that referral for you? Do you want me to sit there with you whilst you go through that referral? Should I come to the GP with you? Just asking them questions about that and putting them at the center and making sure that the decisions that you are making is based around what they want and what they need, because the last thing you want to do is open up a can of worms and then they feel that they're not able to trust anyone anymore. However, if it's the case where the individual is experiencing, for instance, suicidal thoughts, and they have a set in stone plan that they're going to go ahead with in terms of ending their life, or if they are at risk to themselves or to anyone else, then first things first, would recommend you to actually get in contact with someone as soon as possible. If it's an emergency, dial 999, get that support from there. If they do need immediate support, there's also the NHS 111 service, or actually putting them in an Uber, in a car, going with them to A&E. They have mental health emergency services at A&E as well. A lot of people are not aware of that. So those are the things that I would recommend. But of course, if they are at risk, if their safety is at risk, but all the decisions that you make is about putting them first, putting that individual first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just going to wrap up here.
Great.
Just a few things that are on the chat. One from Gus, I believe. Not every pastor is ready for counseling, but we often assume pastors are by default able to do it. The other one is from Olga. Healthy Minds is one of our local IAPT organizations. And based on the comments that Leroy just said, it also depends on whether they are a child or not.
Oh, yeah.
Any comments there, Vanessa, before we kind of wrap that up?
Yep. So again, if it is a child, then of course, if they're under the age of 16 or even 18, making sure that you do contact a service as soon as possible, or even contacting their caregiver as well. So with children, of course, you need to make sure that there is someone who knows about what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so I want to say a huge thank you to Vanessa for today. You've said, some pretty heavy topics here and a lot to think about.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you too. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I hope everyone was able to get something from this. And feel free to, I'm just going to leave my email address on the board as well if you've got any questions.
Okay. So we're just going to close off. Gus is going to close off with prayer in a few minutes. But whilst I've got everybody here, Alex and I, as TVYF, would like to thank you for doing this for us today. We also have some few programs coming up in the future that you might be interested in as a group. We have one, Knowing Your Rights, and that's going to be taken by Judy Clements, who used to be the, if Pastor could correct me, the head of the police commission in the UK. So that's going to come up in the next few weeks. We also have drug and alcohol awareness program that's going to be taken by Hope UK. And we have one by one of the pastors from camp meeting on sexual addiction and pornography. You did hear him at the camp meeting as well. So those are things just to think about for the future, but we will let you know. Again, thank you, Vanessa. Any final comments from you? And then Gus will close it off with prayer.
That's great. Thank you very much again for having me, and thank you everyone for participating. I hope you were able to take something from this today.
Thank you.
Okay, Gus.
Okay, let's just have a quick word of prayer. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you so much for allowing us this great opportunity, even during quarantine and during this pandemic, that we're still able to congregate as a community, as a church. In some ways, we're even congregating better than we did ever before. So I'd like to thank you for this experience and opportunity to be able to connect in this way. At this point, I'd like to put Vanessa before you. We'd like to thank you for nurturing her life and nurturing her as she's grown up until this point in her life and in her ministry and in her career. May you continue to shine a light on it and help her to continue to grow in wisdom and knowledge and understanding, that she may go around and help your people, whether it's in the church or in the world, that she be able to direct them in this important topic of mental health. As you said in your word, our mind is a very, very key and vulnerable aspect of our lives that determines greatly the outcomes that our output is in life, or how the church functions. So pray, Lord, that you may continue to just shine a light on their ministry, that we may be able to learn more and more about our mind and about how we work and how we relate to the things around us, and how we can deal with key struggles that are there in the world and in the church in terms of depression and anxiety. Give them knowledge and understanding, and help us as well as the members as we continue to discuss future topics, that we may continue to grow in these aspects, which are very important. I also like to thank you and commit Alex and David, our leader in TVYF, into your hands as they continue to plan more programs in the future, that we may continue to have a high standard as we have had today, and that it may be a blessing to all of us. And above all, please be with all of us and help us in the different struggles that we have as we seek for answers and remedies and solutions to the difficulties that we're going through in terms of our mental health. I pray that you may guide us, be our help, be our comforter, and lead us to the place where you desire us to be. Show us who we are in you, and help us to continue to keep our identity rooted in you, and as you continue to grow us and prepare us for the future things that are to happen in our lives. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Just one thing before you move.